The other day, I was at the beach just daydreaming and all, and I was sitting at that square near the wooden deck on the seawall. Oh yeah, I know that place. Yeah, I was just watching people fishing from there, and the wind was blowing really strongly in one direction that day, and there were some kites hovering low in the sky, like they were pinned in the air or something, because they were using the wind to stay up. Oh yeah, the kite's ability to do that is amazing. Yeah, it really is. Seeing those kites with their big wings spread out, staying in the air with such ease was really something to marvel. But then, among those kites, there were also quite a few crows there with them. What? Crows? Crows don't glide through the air like that, do they? Yeah, it's true. Unlike hawks, crows can't glide in the air, but they gather and observe hawks gliding in the sky from the power lines in the area. Wow, that's an amazing sight. Yeah, and eventually some of them start to try out. They start imitating the hawks based on their observations. So a few crows began to glide just like hawks. Really? Don't crows glide differently from hawks? Well, on that day, some crows were watching a hawk floating motionlessly at a certain point in the air, riding the strong wind blowing from a specific direction. They observed how the hawk moved its wings and balanced its center of gravity while remaining in one spot. After imitating the hawk, a few crows took off from the power lines and began to glide. At first, they failed to glide and fell off the air, returning to the power lines repeatedly to try again. But gradually, they learned how to glide. Since the hawks remained at a low altitude in one spot that day, it was easy to crows perched on the power line to observe it. I think as a result of trial and error, some crows gradually learned how to glide just like the hawk. Crows are said to be smart, aren't they? In the end, no matter how much trial and error they go through, crows can't glide as well as hawks, and they probably don't have that desire or necessity to do so. So I don't think they obsess over gliding and abandon everything else to focus solely on practicing gliding. That's true. I've never heard of crows attending a gliding training center and sacrifice sleep and food to learn how to glide. Exactly. So in other words, crows are crows and hawks are hawks. Crows may not be able to glide, but they have intelligent minds, while hawks may not have the same level of intelligence as crows, but are born with the ability to glide. I see. If we apply this to humans, it's important to discover early on whether we are hawks, crows, or even peas, and utilize those characteristics to our advantage. For example, imagine if there was a being who thought they were a hawk and sat on the ground, waiting eagerly for wings to grow, but even after all the waiting, the wings never grew, and they became disheartened and eventually buried themselves in the ground, thinking it was all over. But then, in the darkness of the soil, a root began to sprout, and a leaf emerged, and suddenly they began to grow into a pea. It's possible something like that could happen. I see. Once a pea begins to grow as a pea plant, even though it's not something it wished for, good things start happening one after another. For example, the vines grow rapidly, the leaves flourish, and it unintentionally suppress other plants, monopolizing the sunlight and growing more and more. It's a world of difference compared to when he thought he was a hawk and was buried in the soil. Yeah, that's right. If it had just lived as a pea plant from the beginning, it might not have had so much trouble. However, there's a possibility that it may not have sprouted as a pea plant unless it went through the process of mistakenly thinking it was a hawk, feeling down because it didn't grow wings, sinking into the soil, and so on. I see. So it could be that feeling down and thinking it is a hawk when it's actually a pea plant. It's just a pre-programmed algorithm that it's born with. Exactly. The opposite could also be true. What do you mean by the opposite? Well, imagine if you were actually a hawk, but you thought you were a pea plant. For example, you might have been buried in the ground thinking you were a pea plant, but nothing was sprouting. You might have thought, I'm done for, and felt depressed, but suddenly your wings start growing and you begin to glide in the sky. Before you know it, you are soaring high above, looking down at the world below. You might even see some tasty prey walking around, but you'd think pea plants don't eat things like that, and spend your time hungry and philosophizing. Wow, that sounds like quite a predicament. Yeah, that's why I think it's best to just be what you are from the beginning. beginning. Hogs should be hogs, and pea plants should be pea plants. I couldn't agree more.